The letter arrived at the Royal College of Surgeons on a Tuesday, 3 folds of paper sealed with dark wax that looked black under the November sky. Inside sky. Inside, 17 words in a trembling hand. I have watched a patient rise from the grave, and I no longer trust what I know about death. The surgeon who opened it, Bartholomew Croft, laughed once and stopped. He knew the signature. Dr. Arthur Molyneux, a physician so cautious he had once refused to diagnose a broken leg until consulting 3 textbooks. Molyneux did not write about resurrections. He wrote about dosages and drainage. Croft read it again. Then he ordered his carriage. The divergence did not happen in a laboratory. It happened in a basement, in a jar forgotten for 6 weeks. The year was 1872, 56 years before Fleming would notice a mold on a Petri dish. In this timeline, the mold had already been scraped into a bottle and dripped into the wound of a dying maidservant named Ethel Corrigan. Tobias Wainwright was not searching for a cure. He was searching for a purple dye. The mold that grew on his discarded bread disappointed him, a pale yellow broth that smelled of decay. He threw it into a bucket. 6 weeks later, Ethel Corrigan had sliced her hand on glass, developed a fever, and lay with redness creeping up her arm. The household prepared for a funeral. Wainwright, in a fit of desperation, remembered the bucket. Something in that yellow liquid had stopped the rot on his bread. He did not knowing the word antibiotic, he poured it onto her wound. 3 days later, Ethel sat up and asked for tea. That is where history fractures. In our timeline, the observation would have been filed and forgotten. In this timeline, it was unearthed by a young medical student named Harriet Venn, tasked with cataloging Wainwright's possessions after his death in 1874. She read the journal entry 3 times, then walked across London in a rainstorm to find Bartholomew Croft, water streaming from her hair, clutching the journal like a holy book. She was 22. She was not allowed to practice medicine, not allowed to attend lectures, only to take notes and hope someone would listen. Croft listened. By 1876, they had isolated the active compound, naming it moldine, later refined to penicillium extract, then simply penicillin. By 1878, they had treated 47 septic patients. 43 survived. The 4 who died were too far gone, organs shutting down. But 43 people who should have died, who had been given last rites and measured for coffins, walked out of the hospital. The establishment fought back. The Lancet published the mold menace in 1879, warning of resistance. A bishop suggested surviving infection was God's will. Prominent surgeon Sir Reginald Finch refused to use penicillin on principle, then contracted a post-operative infection, changed his mind while in fever sweat, survived, and became its most vocal advocate. The first war to feel the weight was not the Great War. It was the Zulu War of 1879. British soldiers carrying penicillin pouches survived wounds that would have killed them in our timeline. Survival rates for abdominal wounds jumped from 10% to 62%. The difference was immediate, visible. A soldier named Thomas Kilbride, shot through the gut at Isandlwana, carried 20 miles, treated with a moldy compress, walking within 3 weeks. Political consequences were enormous. In our timeline, high mortality from colonial conflicts kept the British military cautious and constrained expansion. Here, soldiers survived. Armies stayed in the field. Colonies held with fewer losses. The scramble for Africa accelerated, hardened, became more efficient. The Berlin Conference of 1884 carved up a continent with the knowledge that European armies could survive tropical diseases. King Leopold's agents carried penicillin. Rubber quotas were met. Atrocities lasted longer, killed more, because enforcers did not die of fever. This is the paradox of progress. The substance that saved Ethel Corrigan lubricated the machinery of empire. By 1890, penicillin was produced across Europe, crudely fermentation in glass flasks, filtration through cloth, but it worked. The price dropped. A child with a septic scratch no longer meant a funeral. A woman with childbed fever no longer meant a widower. Europe's population surged. Infant mortality dropped from 15% to 6%. Life expectancy rose by a decade in a single generation. Cities swelled with people who had not died of infections that should have killed them. The 1901 recorded numbers demographers had not predicted. The housing crisis of 1903 was not about architecture. It was about the staggering fact that far more people were alive than expected. Then came the assassination. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. In our timeline, both died within the hour. In this timeline, a Serbian doctor named Aleksandar Petrovic, carrying a small vial of penicillin extract, reached the scene within minutes. He treated the wounds. He applied the mold. Franz Ferdinand survived. The July crisis unfolded differently. The Archduke wrote to his uncle urging restraint. The emperor hesitated. The ultimatum to Serbia was softer. Mobilization slower. Declarations came later with fewer allies. There was a war. There was always going to be a war. But it was the Austro-Russian War of 1915, a smaller conflict that lasted 18 months and killed 300,000 instead of 10 million. Trenches were dug but not filled. Machine guns fired, but the wounded were treated, survived, went home. Europe did not bleed out. Monarchies survived, limping into the 1920s with crowns intact. The Russian Revolution happened, but smaller, less consequential. Lenin died exile. The Soviet Union was never formed. By 1937, the world was different. Antibiotics had been joined by sulfa drugs, vaccines, crude antivirals. Medical research accelerated by decades. The first heart-lung machine was tested in 1932, the first kidney transplant in 1936, the first artificial heart in 1939. But shadows were long. Antibiotic resistance emerged faster here. By 1905, strains of Streptococcus and Staphylococcus began shrugging off penicillin. The search for new compounds became a treadmill that never stopped. The pharmaceutical industry, far larger and more powerful than in our timeline, eclipsed oil, steel, everything. And the empire saved by penicillin, the British Empire preserved by soldiers, survival in the 1880s and 1890s, still stood in 1937, still ruled from London. The King Emperor's portrait hung in hospitals from Cape Town to Calcutta. The trains ran on time in Delhi because the engineers had survived childhood infections. The letter that started it all, the one Bartholomew Croft received in 1872, was preserved in a glass case at the Royal College of Surgeons. Harriet Venn, who lived to be 93, visited it every year on the anniversary of her first meeting with Croft. She would stand before the glass, hands behind her back, and read, "I have watched a patient rise from the grave, and I no longer trust what I know about death." She never said anything more. She never needed to. If you found this journey through a world reshaped by a single mold compelling, consider subscribing to explore more histories that never were, each one a door into a past that might have been, waiting to be opened. Until next time, keep questioning what you think you know about how the world became what it is.